Good afternoon and welcome to DeepCrawl's webinar on Google Search Console and the mobile power play. My name is John Myers. I'm the Chief Growth Officer of DeepCrawl. And I'm very lucky today to be joined by Aleyda Solis from Oriente. And we're going to talk and debate to an extension, a bit of Q&A around about practical tips on the view of SEO and thinking about the potential of the mobile world and how we shift towards it. Some of the latest trends, key indicators that we're seeing from Google, and ultimately the rollout of the mobile index. When will it be? When will it happen? When does Google start actually rolling it out, or will it be one bulk upload? We'll hopefully answer a few of those questions over the next hour or so. Ultimately as well, I think it's about marrying it with Google Search Console too. There's a load of great major insights coming out, some key metrics coming from the Google Search Console now, and I've seen some interesting new reporting updates around betas as well. But before we kick all of that off and we get into Aleyda's great presentation that she'll take us through, I just want to obviously stress to you guys that the webinar will be recorded. We will email a link out to a recap of this tomorrow morning of the recording, so you can actually listen back to or take it at the office and take some practical tips away with it as well. We will be taking questions live, so if you'd like to submit a question, please do so through the GoToWebinar control panel. You can at any time. We'll take those questions and I'll start asking those to Aleyda or answering some myself hopefully as well after Aleyda's presentation. And also, obviously, please take time to take a look at the DeepCrawl website, the fact that we've just launched our new Google Search Console Advanced Integration. It is available for you guys to have a look at, grab a free trial, and ultimately see what Google Search Console has to offer via DeepCrawl. First of all, obviously, huge welcome to Aleyda. Great to have you on the line, Aleyda, and from Oriente, and welcome to the webinar. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you for the invitation, John. Really appreciate it.
Anytime, anytime. It feels like I only saw you yesterday. It was great to catch up at Turing last week in Edinburgh. Great conference. You did an amazing presentation there. I'm not going to steal any thunder of some of the stats in there, but I certainly sat in the front row, listened intently for the 35 minutes that you were running, and you had some wonderful stats around mobile stuff. Got some really interesting ideas around when mobile index is going to play out. And ultimately as well, I think what more importantly for me was thinking about the ranking signals for mobile, because I think we're starting to move to quite an interesting crossroads in the mobile desktop battle in some respects. I don't know what your view on that is.
Yes, indeed. I really believe that this is critical right now to take into consideration, even if a lot of people still say that mobile is not necessarily as important and fundamental for them because they are not a B2C but a B2B. But you know, what the mobile first index is definitely going to be something critical to start doing.
Yeah, I tell you, I mean, I've personally used the word in the past, game changer in a lot of respects, and I think it's interesting to see how Google is treating this one and thinking about how to roll this out in some respects, because they've kind of relied on desktop for the last 15 or so years, and they've been very dominant about the splitting the desktop, mobile, and different pieces out. But it seems like they're all in and they're all moving towards the mobile piece now.
Yes, indeed. Thankfully, like more and more I have seen over the last few months, right? There are more tools that are supporting or giving the segmentation, the functionality to do whatever functionalities that they provide, right? The service that they provide. Segmenting per device, so segmenting on mobile, like for example, DeepCrawl allows mobile crawling, and you have fantastic reports that already segment and validate many of the mobile configurations that are needed and that we are going to go through. But there was this necessity of tools supporting mobile segmentation for doing a proper keyword research and identify mobile search behavior, for monitoring specifically the mobile activity from our rankings and connecting with traffic and conversions, right? So more and more we are going to see that this is changing. So I'm very happy to see this happening before the mobile first index is here too.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's interesting to see that, obviously Google Search Console's been around for a little while now, but it's really in the last sort of 6 months Google's really ramped up a lot of the features within that. I mean, we're very proud of the integration that we've done here at DeepCrawl, and it seems to be receiving a lot of good feedback for the features that we put in there and the things that we're calculating into the crawls that we're doing on an ongoing point. But I was reading an interesting piece from Barry Schwartz the other day talking about you know, they effectively, some of the new reports that they put into beta, and it's interesting to see things around index coverage, AMP fixing flow, sitemap submission flow. As they, you know, I think it's an interesting indicator, and I don't want to steal the thunder of your presentation, but it's great to see that Google is ramping out these features into GSC and giving the opportunity to the SEO to find out more content and more things that are going on from a mobile perspective, which just leads you into that question of, you know, when, where, how is Google going to push this one out? And I think there's a few indicators on that one, and I'm absolutely certain, without a doubt, that your presentation is going to throw some light on that. And we can chat about it afterwards, kind of thing, and go through a few thoughts and maybe try and nail a date down as to when we think it might happen. But without further ado, I'd like to hand over the floor to your good self, Aleyda, and let you you know, talk us through some thoughts and views that you have. And let's get your presentation up, and good luck. And you got some great content, and I'll be listening intently with everybody else.
Thank you. You're seeing my screen now already, right? Is all going okay? Yes?
All good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm going to start showing a little bit, and I'm going to switch also a little bit to show a few examples over my browser. And please, John, if at some point you want to point something out, feel free to do it. More than happy to hear your thoughts and feedback regarding certain aspect, any aspect that you find useful, of course.
Sure, no problem at all.
So the first thing is, of course, like the evidence that mobile is huge, is important. That there's a high share of mobile of traffic in general that comes from mobile devices already. And here's the example in the UK. It is something very similar for the US. It can change a little bit, independence of the country. However, we can see that there's already a trend, and most of like the top websites already have this high share of mobile traffic, Google specifically. And we can see here, for example, the share of mobile traffic of google.co.uk and google.com. So it shouldn't be really a surprise for any of us that last year we first heard from Googlers that search was now mostly being mobile driven. And a lot of people say, oh, but in my sector, it's not like this, right? I am a B2B, and most of the users enter into my website, they are not using mobile devices, or transaction-wise, they are not using mobile devices, right? Of course, this will change independence of which sector you are, but in general, at an aggregated basis, most of the searches right now are happening already from mobile devices at some point, and therefore, it's also again very reasonable that Google says if most of our users are coming from mobile, then to rank these websites, the signals should come also from the mobile presence of these properties of these websites, right? Sometimes, and this is sadly still the truth, and we are going to see a few examples, there are websites that provide an amazing experience, they are very relevant, they are very well optimized, not only from an SEO perspective, but from a usability perspective on desktop, and then on mobile is unfortunately not the same. So of course Google needs to switch this, needs to migrate also and start taking this mobile signals into consideration. A lot of people thought until now, and this is very curious because a lot of people have told me this, but Google already has had a mobile crawler for a while, right? And yes, they have been using this crawler to discover mobile targeted content. However, they haven't actually been using that information that they identify with their crawler to build like a proper index that they will actually use and their rankings until now. But they are first then switching towards a mobile first index. So the ranking signals will come from the mobile web presence, not the desktop one. And this is supposed already to happen next year. A lot of people, this is a typical question that is always asked to Googlers and in the Q&As and big events, right? And everybody's doing changes right now. People is scared, of course. They don't want to be left out. So they have said that we can all expect that this won't happen overnight. There will be like a real preparation towards this, and they are going to to inform people well in advance, and it's already it already seems that it's going to happen at some point next year, not this one even. And this is the one thing. Right now we are living still on a desktop first and a desktop only, sorry, index. At some point we are going to switch to a mobile first, and then the next step is to switch to a mobile only index. And this is where it really comes interesting, right? For a while, mobile signals are going to come first and will be taken into consideration as a priority, and then Google will rely on the already existing desktop signals. However, at some point, everything is going to switch over mobile. So this is when it's critical to avoid the fundamental issues for Google to really access, understand also what our mobile web content is about, and to really offer Google the relevant mobile content. And there is a very clear issue with mobile, I think, especially with this type of things. Like if we all go to the Forbes websites, very well-known websites like this one, right? We'll still get things that, of course, are not, for sure, are not really friendly from a user perspective, and that Google also don't take as a positive signal from a mobile optimization perspective either. Like, for example, the interstitials, the pop-ups for which they have already done an update a few months ago, and they are already taken into consideration in a negative way if you use them in your mobile web experience, right? And beyond fundamental SEO issues, like there are very obvious problems when it comes to user interface in general, I would say, and mobile content, how we structure the content, how we organize this content is still not very clear, right? It's still for main publications like this. If we start analyzing where is the real content there, like really, if Google starts all of a sudden taking this into consideration as a ranking signal, as a relevant signal, well, a lot of this very important websites are going to be in trouble, because there are so many different patterns there that can be even considered dark patterns that are definitely not being done in desktop anymore. However, on mobile they are still there, right? The same with shopping and conversion related metrics. We can see that all this has a very evident consequence when people end up buying and doing an action on their mobile. And it was last week, for example, when I was in Turin at the Turin Festival in Edinburgh. I asked the audience, like, how many of you use your mobile devices to search? And everybody like raised their hand. When I asked how many of the audience actually use their mobile devices to do a transaction, to shop, to buy something, to register, less people raise their hand. And of course, this is due to very obvious problems, optimization problems happening with the interface. And we can see here like which are the most important mobile shopping problems. And we can see that most of these problems have to do with very evident optimization issues of speed, pages loading very slowly, having to enlarge in order to see the information, even if it is supposed to be already optimized for mobile devices, and or the need to switch over the full site version in order to find the information, because there's this tendency when optimizing for mobile just to getting rid of the content without actually thinking if this is content that is actually being searched by the mobile user, right? So it ends up being very, very frustrating and having this type of direct effects too, of people switching towards another website, even when they are finding so many issues to buy. And of course, this has also conversion consequences. If we go to analysis, the conversion rate on smartphones is much lower than the one from desktop or even tablet, as we can see here. So it's critical, it's important, not only for mobile first, is that if we are going to end up getting much more visibility and traffic towards mobile properties and presence, we cannot rely on this type of conversion rate. Otherwise, that means that we will be really losing well, the buying power that we may have already happening right now. And there is this one thing, right? Until now, we knew that Google supported three types of mobile configurations, right? Responsive web design, using the same HTML, the same content information, and just reformatting it to be shown correctly, independent of the screen, relying on CSS media queries. Then we had dynamic serving, identifying which was the device, and based on the device, show one or another HTML through the same URL. And then independent mobile websites, these websites that are shown on an M subdomain as a de facto standard through their own URL structure that we need to configure and map out in order for Google to understand the relationship between the desktop and mobile. And we are going to see how to validate this. So we had these three options. A lot of people thought, and this is the thing, a lot of people thought that just because of having a responsive web design, by default, they were already mobile optimized, which is not true. It's like thinking that just because someone has already a desktop version, they are already optimized for desktop SEO. And the same with mobile, right? Like the three approaches have pros and cons. The three approaches have best practices, as we can see here, and we have the access towards Google Mobile SEO Guide that really like they provide guidelines for each one of the different configurations. Our guidelines are shared by all of them. Like, for example, we should make all of the CSS, images, JS accessible for the crawler. When we do dynamic serving, we should make sure to add the Barai user agent in the HTTP status, for example, with separate URLs. We should mark each of one of them like this. To make sure that each mobile URL points out their desktop alternate as a canonical, as an original version. Because remember, until now, it was this URLs, desktop URLs that were being taken into consideration and in index and assets, not the mobile ones. And the desktop one needed to point to these other mobile URLs as alternates. So Google will understand this relationship without seeing that these URLs were duplications from each other, because they were not really duplicates, right? And this is the one thing. For example, with this particular configuration of independent mobile websites, there have been many questions, like this one that I'm showing on screen from Survive, for example, asking Gary from Google, saying like, is this will need to change, because of course this specific configuration pointing out the desktop URL as the original one, as the canonical version, it doesn't make sense anymore with a mobile index, right? With a mobile first index, because it should be the other way around. It should be the mobile version, the one that should be original, the one that Google should take into consideration to index and to access in general. So of course Google says no, because they understand that if they ask all SEOs and web developers and website owners to change this, it's going to take a lot, and it's not going to happen overnight. So for the moment, Google says it's okay, you can continue having this type of configuration. We are going to understand it and support it in the future. However, it's very evident that Google wants to also at some point move on from this, and already like when being asked about, oh, are you like recommending or moving and migrating from an M type of configuration, independent mobile website type of configuration, to a responsive one? Yes or no? And they say, okay, it depends on your necessity, of course. But if you are going to do it now. And this is true. If you are going to move from an M independent type of configuration with a subdomain towards a responsive web design or a dynamic serving mobile website, you should really do it before the mobile index happen and its launch. Why? Because right now it should be pretty trivial, because remember, your mobile URLs are not necessarily being taken into consideration for ranking or as being assets in general, because Google relies on the desktop index. However, in the future, when they launch the mobile index, they are going to be the ones being taken into consideration. They are going to be assets, so it's going to be a real migration. So you want to avoid that type of unnecessary hassle in the future and do it right now. And of course, it can be very straightforward to validate if Google sees a specific page as mobile friendly. Like, this is the fundamental validation to do page by page. It's so important though to also keep in mind that there might be false positives. Like in this case, for example, Aer Lingus, they are showing this interstitial in the mobile version when we access it, and as you are seeing on your screen. So it's very evident that it's not necessarily complies with Google best practices. Also, the filter for interstitials and specifically app pop-ups and interstitials like this one. However, it does pass the validation. So it's important that we all keep in mind that there might be false positives like this. And this is where the Google Search Console comes very handy, and I'm going to switch to show a little bit how we can use all the type of functionalities that are already provided by Google here. And here, in my case, and I'm going to show up a little bit, is my website, right, that I'm showing here. And I go to the mobile usability report here, and of course I don't have any main issues. However, it's very common, I might say, and I have had them in the past, just because I might be integrating certain very old element like an iframe, for example, or an old video that rely on Flash, things like that, right? Or something that I embedded from any other website that might be not necessarily compliant. Like, for example, I used to have this Google Docs integrated on my site, and that make to not pass this validation, right? So this way is very important to go and check if there are already like critical issues being reported, like, for example, having the text too small to read or too close to each other. Sometimes it's just to flag little things that can be improved from a design perspective. Other times it's something very critical, actually, having not the viewport tag that is needed for any mobile configuration. So it is understood that there is a mobile option there is critical. However, all this is highly facilitated by DeepCrawl. I have to say, you were seeing on screen the mobile report that DeepCrawl has integrated by default. First, a mobile overview, and then categorization. I love the categorization first, and this is the first area where you should go, because it informs which are the different types of mobile presence and mobile configuration that you have on your site. If it is a responsive web design, if you are doing dynamic serving, if you have a separate mobile and desktop URLs, if you have AMP implemented, if you have mobile app links to with app indexing. So it really tells you if you have even a combination of this configuration. And I'm going to go very quickly to show you here, for example, mobile here, the issues with any of these configurations, and then each one of them, which are those that are really being implemented in one and other cases, right? And so, for example, in my case here, I had AMP pages implemented, and we are going to see which are the main issues, right? So for each one of the URLs that are being identified as having AMP, all of the different elements that should be validated from an AMP perspective are flagged here, are informed about every URL. If it is, what is the HTTP status, if it is indexable or not, from where it's being linked, where we can find the reference towards it in the source code, in the HTML source code of the original page. And here, if at some point it also has a separate additional separate mobile version, right? If there is an independent mobile version besides the AMP one, if they are responsive, yes, it is also responsive. If you are included a Barra user agent that might point out that you are doing a dynamic serving, yes or no. If there is a viewport set, how it is set there, yes or not, and how it had changed over time. If you have been crawling your website across the time, right? So for me, this is super useful. Already facilitates a lot of the work. The reason why I don't need to go and validate one by one every URL of my site. And then again, be reasonable here. And this is why it's very important to take into consideration which are the type of visitors that you have, which are the devices that they are using. And for this, for example, going to Google Analytics and seeing which are the specific devices that your users are accessing your website with. Like in my case here is the iPhone and then iPad. So these are the devices for which I want to validate for which I want to emulate and see how my website is actually being accessed with these devices, right? And I love that there are, like, for example, I don't know if you saw that I published a few months ago in Search Engine Land a post regarding Chrome DevTools. You have a very, very handy tool here in your browser, and you can go to just the DevTools by going to developer options, and I'm sorry because I understand that I have it in Spanish here, or just right click here and go to inspect, and you are going to see, you see here, you're going to see these options here, and then you can toggle here for and select any device that you want to emulate. So from the search to any actual website, you can go and search for Google SEO mobile here, and you will be able to see the results as if you were in any of the devices. And here, for example, we can see AMP pages ranking already, etc. So it's critical for us to also check with the relevant device how my most important pages, how these pages that have much more search volume, visibility, traffic in general, and activity from mobiles are getting viewed. And for this is why it is critical, the integration with the search analytics data of the Google Search Console, which is something that right now also DeepCrawl had just launched a few days ago, which is very handy. And again, you go to Search Analytics and you can filter per device the activity. So here, it is so important to answer questions like which are the pages that are more visited and would have more clicks from mobile search results, that have maybe more impressions but lower clicks. So that means that the click-through rate is lower. There's something going on with this pages ranking, potentially not the right pages being ranked. The title maybe is not correctly being shown, or something like this that we want to figure out, we want to identify, to fix. Also, these pages with the lower positions, but that are very important because they are very popular. For example, we can then, for example, go to any of the pages, and we can see here some AMP pages, and click on any of them, and click again to get the queries for which they are being shown on mobile specifically. And something that I really like, again, if I reset the results here to get all of the top pages receiving mobile web impressions here, the highest mobile web impressions, is to compare this with the desktop one. So compare devices, mobile and desktop here. This is critical to better understand and identify gaps that we can see over the behavior of mobile versus desktop users. So this is critical, and I know that DeepCrawl is now taking this data into consideration. So you can see, for example, which are the pages that you have crawled with the mobile crawler, for example, that have a lot of activity in the Google Search Console, or have no activity in the Google Search Console. And for example, if it is in the Google Search Console, it has a lot of activity, but it hasn't been found on the crawl. For example, this might be a page that is an orphan page, and maybe you have internal web structure issues, and you should start linking to this page that is important and already have a lot of activity from mobile, for example. So there's so much to do and questions to answer with this integration, and to actually make your actions much more prioritized and actionable over time. So here's something important. Emulate with your browser to see if the content of the most important pages of your site is relevant, consistent, and to make sure that your mobile web content is accessible and indexable towards Google. And this is so critical to avoid including no index and faulty redirects and worse than usual crawling experience. And we are going to see how, for example, with DeepCrawl that can be quite easily validated too. The most important things, though, that something very common, and again fundamental to take into consideration, is what we saw with Erlingus before. We shouldn't be showing pop-ups and interstitials to incentivize people to download our app. This is penalized. We should be using app banners instead that are natively supported, and we can easily implement like this right away. And something that we should really do to identify this type of errors is crawling our website using the Googlebot for smartphones like this. We should go to, for example, our crawler setting, DeepCrawl settings like this allow us to choose any crawler. And you can see here how user agent Googlebot for a smartphone, and we can then crawl all of the websites. So all of the problems, all of the issues that we will find here, from duplicated content, titles with descriptions, the configurations, canonicals, redirects, happenings or not, redirect change, etc., etc. All of that will be happening in a mobile web versions if we select the mobile crawler. So this is critical, and this is what I mentioned before about the Search Console integration. If you see here, it is in the source gap. So DeepCrawl already show us, if, for example, this page is indexable, and how many impressions does it have in the Google Search Console, and clicks, and the click-through rate, and the position, for example. So we can see that if there's a correlation here, or I want to prioritize to fix the titles, the content, to improve the content, if those pages that really have already a much more higher impact, or will likely have a much higher impact, even if the position right now is not necessarily that high, because it already has a very important impressions. So we can use this data also into consideration when assessing our content. And these are what we should really look for when going through the crawler outcomes and data, right? For example, the pages that are showing very little content on mobile. And this is an example. We can see, for example, how Royal Bank of Scotland, they have this homepage on the desktop that really shows by default much more content than their mobile alternative, as you can see here. The mobile version here show far less content, and opportunely on a mobile first index, this is the content, the one at the right on the mobile version, that will be taken into consideration, and you should be optimizing. And so to the question of what we should do with our content, right? Google said we should be taking the content, most important content, to mobile web presence. You should avoid just to eliminate this very common activity of eliminating your content, and then not including structured data, because there's this tendency also in web development to not include the structured data if you're using a dynamic serving or an independent mobile website, because the page will tend to have a little bit more weight. Of course, there will be more code in it. However, if you do that, Google won't be able to take this information into consideration to assess and to run your mobile web presence in that case. So it's unfortunate, but we will need to also include all of this information and sort out what's the best way to show this information or not. And there's one caveat here. Until now, Google had also said that content should be visible on desktop all the times for them to take that content into consideration. So, for example, if we were using tabs, for example, or overlays, or if we were using expandable type of features like the one that I'm showing on screen, but on desktop, they wouldn't be taking that text into consideration. Even if we were implementing them with CSS, all these display nones or visibility hiddens in CSS and divs, they wouldn't be taking them into consideration because they wanted to emulate the experience that we were given to users. However, they understand, and they have said that this is not going to happen on mobile. They understand that on mobile we will have less space, much more restrictions to place content properly. So, for example, what we are seeing right now on screen is completely okay and will be completely okay as long as the content is there. So having this clicked to expand the content and to show the content is completely all right, will be completely all right. So it's important that we start doing this on our mobile presence to actually show all the relevant information. So to make it also actually findable and to make sure that Google assess our presence based on that content too. And this is the one thing, how do you organize all this content that you already have to make it fit and to connect with the actual mobile web behavior? And we have here something, right? Like a lot of mobile web presences, they just make it shorter and they're organized. They're already much more important options to be easily accessible from a mobile device like this one, like the one I'm showing, right? However, it's critical to use the data that I showed before from the Google Search Console and compare it like this, as I showed before, to gather data like the one I'm showing on screen right now. We can see, like, for example, if we go and search for the outlet keyword queries for this e-commerce website, and we compare mobile and desktop, we will find here that there are, like, on one hand, a very similar position for mobile and desktop. However, we are going to see a much higher volume of impressions from mobile for the queries that include outlet or outlet near me specifically, because it's geolocated, right? So a lot of people tend to use this type of queries and terms when they're on the mobile devices. The same we can do by comparing with our competition and identifying which are the type of queries that are getting much more visibility with already from mobile. By using SEO histories, there are so many keyword tools right now that already support mobile, which is great. So we can add the mobile filter here and identify which are the queries on mobile and look for those queries, not only the transactional ones, but the ones that are going to also to be taken into consideration to search for online ideas, brand discovery, product price, features, availability, offers. So the whole customer journey and all the different queries that can be used across the customer journey before, during, and after the actual transaction. Because we can see things, we may see and end up seeing things like this, like the ones that I'm showing right now. Maybe there are a few keywords or terms, like, for example, the ones related to travel backpacks that have a much higher general search volume like this and all of the related terms. And then, for example, backpack sale, you see that they have less search volume as an particularly certain terms, but at an aggregated basis, right? So what you will say, oh, I am going to continue prioritizing travel backpacks on my mobile web presence. But no, if we take these two sets, these two lists of terms, and I will recommend to do this with every single category and characteristic and type of search in your site, and you go and validate them with the Google Keyword Planner. If you take these groups of terms and check for the device popularity and usage, you will see differences like this one, for example. The one to the right, the backpack sale, is very highly and very popularly searched for mobile devices. The one for travel backpacks, not so much. So of course, if you are going to maybe prioritize something for mobile devices, not only backpacks, but the sales, because it seems that there are this sense of urgency when searching for mobile, right? And searching for the sales-related items and products, for example, that might have even more weight on mobile than on desktop. So this is the type of validation that you will need to do. Something important here. How did I get this data from the Google Keyword Planner? Go and the usual step to get the search volume of keywords, and then you will need to take an extra step of take these keywords to a campaign plan, and just to revise the information. You don't actually need to do a campaign, but just take the next step to be able to get this validation of search volume per device that is going to be super useful to identify which is the actual content that you should prioritize in one way or another, right? And also it's critical, the mobile page speed as a ranking factor that hasn't been taken into consideration until now. However, it already has a huge importance and is critical from a user experience perspective. You don't want to have this type of horrible bounce rate. So it's also, again, super important to go and check how much does it take for your mobile web presence to load. Very straightforward with, again, Chrome DevTools. You can do that, and you can see how the DOM takes to load the overall content takes to load too, and you can see like differences like this one is huge, like House of Frasers for some reason, 19 seconds to load all of the content of the site. Which pages you should check particularly, which ones you should prioritize. Again, go to the Google Analytics, go to the page views, the pages that have a much higher page views and that are more critical towards the customer journey, and use as in the conversion path. And you can go even to the speed suggestion section, because you will see the average load time there, and you're gonna get a link to go directly to the page speed insights recommendations. And even with the kind of tools out this section here, you can load any page and you will get directly again the recommendations to improve the page speed of those specific pages. But again, you can do this in a much more straightforward way to what we call, and I love this report again, the performance overview, because they will tell you directly which are and you will segment the ones that have a much higher time to load, and you will get information. You see fetch time there, so you can directly identify the one that takes much longer to go, the ones that have a much more visibility and impact on the Google Search Console, and prioritize those to be fixed primarily as a priority before the rest, right? And this is how you can prioritize and advance quicker with the lower hanging fruits. And what I implement in AMP, right? AMP, I'm pretty sure that you have heard of it. It's a simplified HTML that uses optimized resources and cache to serve the pages faster. And the reality is this: even if you have a mobile responsive web design that is supposed to be already optimized, when you use AMP, these pages load super fast, because yeah, they are using JS, they are using CSS that is already it's minimal, it's already very well optimized. So you can see differences like this, huge differences. It's already a requirement for all media sites in order to be included in the news carousels, but more and more, and I went and showed a mobile search result before, we can see a lot of AMP results in SERPs. It's very common also because of all the WordPress plugins are nowadays. Actually, the AMP official one was updated a few days ago. So yes, it's a must already for news websites. All ad networks pretty much already supported, and it is a very strong path to implement and develop all of the type of components that will be required for e-commerce websites. The main issue that I find in this case, and something that you should be really aware of, is that when creating the AMP structure and pages and experience in general, some elements are forgotten, some elements are not yet implemented, like in this case the menu here. It's and of course the engagement of the user will be worse. In a lot of cases this happens because this is implemented just by plugins. So it's critical. If you ask me, what should I take into consideration? Well, you should have the resources to implement AMP, not relying necessarily completely on plugins. It's okay to use plugins as a first step, as a base, but you should have the resources, the development resources, to personalize these templates that are provided by these plugins in order to really comply with all of the SEO's best practices and avoid having this type of issues that you can see here. There are some critical issues that will avoid that Google shows your AMP pages in the Google search results, in mobile search results. For example, the invalid usage of the tags, using HTML tags that are not supported by AMP, invalid CSS, etc., etc. So these are the ones that you should prioritize to fix rather quickly. And again, DeepCrawl already gives very, very granular reports in order to fix these issues, and specifically the one to the right. I really like it because it already tells you like which are the AMP that are referring to pages that are not indexable, that are non-200 pages, that have broken links, that are not in the sitemap, right? That the content there's mismatch in the content, etc., etc. Things that Google will flag in the Google Search Console, but of course you don't want to wait until then after a while, after 3 days, after you have released your AMP pages to identify these issues. You want to crawl before launching them and identify and validate these issues and go very granularly and see where, for example, in this case, is indexable. No, why? You can go and see the specific page and see why it's not indexable. It's meant to be indexable, if it is reasonable to be indexable or no, and be able to prioritize again all of these issues. And the idea is that you get this type of visibility. It's non-trivial, as you can see. Once that you really implement and launch AMP, you will get tons of visibility. Especially if you are in the media sector, you have a news-related site or a site that covers any content that can be included in the carousel, yeah, you will really see the difference in this case. There are a lot of other mobile SEO questions, of course, and I actually included them all in this article that I wrote a couple of months ago at the Moz blog. You can see here how I mapped each type of question that you should ask during the mobile SEO process. And how you can answer them quite easily with many of the tools available nowadays. What I was mentioning before at the beginning of the webinar with John, how thankfully more and more tools are supporting this now, and so you can go and start prioritizing and doing an initial crawl, initial analysis, and identify the mobile search behavior of your user, hopefully with what I have shared before, and continue doing it with the resources that I share here in this post that is hopefully as useful too. So this was my presentation for today, and I hope that you have found it useful, also very useful. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be happy to answer to any of the questions that you have.
Brilliant. Thanks, Aleyda. I certainly have questions. I mean, I think we could probably go on. I could probably got 101 questions. I could probably talk for about the next hour on this, but obviously we've only got 10 minutes left. Great presentation. Thank you very much. Loads of certainly very, very useful content there, and really, thanks for all the DeepCrawl content as well in there as well. I mean, I appreciate the DeepCrawl webinar, but it's great to see you actually kind of in some respects. I think you demoed the mobile section of our product pretty well, so I might be calling on you to do some demos for customers potentially on that one. I think I've got a couple of questions from the audience, which is great. And before I start asking any of mine, I think probably first question to ask is, one question that came up was from a lady called Janine Hill. Was just asking more around structured data for AMP pages. You kind of covered quite a lot about structured data for AMP, but it's something which I'm really keen on as well. And a lot of people kind of see AMP pages as this kind of dark, mystic world in some respects. I mean, I totally agree with you that it's an absolute must for publishers. They've got to get them right. They've got to get that content flowing into the carousel. Like you, I've seen these interesting new features that allow you to potentially commercialize this via Google Pay, and I think we'll start to see e-commerce sites using AMP pages and starting to promote more in the mobile space with AMP. So it's key to see that Google's pushing towards the revenue drivers as well as just the obviously just getting the information in a good structured format. But I think a lot of people think it's really hard to get that structured data into an AMP page. And
yeah, you know what? And there's this one thing, if I remember well, and we can see it here. You see at AMP structured data, it supports it. Like there are certain markup at the beginning that was, and the need of structured data, the article one that is needed in AMP, right, or was needed in initial AMP pages, was identified as something required, but then it became non-critical, at least because Google understood that was going to be much more difficult. Then we had plugins like the Yoast plugin, for example, for WordPress, that made it easier for us to implement. However, I have to say that we need to take into consideration two things with AMP right now, right? Most of the people have AMP pages as an alternate version like this of the already existing responsive web design. And AMP URLs, and I'm going to, these AMP pages are shown through parallel or independent URLs, right? Mm-hmm. And all of these URLs actually point out and refer to the actual initial URL structure the one of the mobile web design, for example, the one of the responsive web design like this, as an original one. So there is a canonical coming from here towards here, and then the mobile responsive web design like this will add an AMP HTML as an alternate for these AMP pages to point out Google that they exist. So AMP actually is like if we had this parallel mobile web structure too. So we need to realize that in this particular case with AMP, where we should add structured data and where we should add all of our content is not necessarily in the AMP, but in the one that is the canonical in this case, which is the responsive web design one.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I think that's, I mean, certainly something I've talked about in the past is that I certainly think that the world that we live in today from a desktop perspective, and then obviously, we're canonicalizing AMP pages to the desktop. I think we're going to see the same environment within mobile, and actually we'll just be running effectively canonicalization of AMP back into the mobile-led page as well. And obviously, there's probably a few different variations on that, whether you're running an M.dot site or whether you're alongside AMP, or whether you're running a dynamic site and using something along the lines of thinking about actually how you call the pages out and pull the pages. We did some interesting research recently around the varied tag, and obviously Google's talking a lot about implementing the varied tag to let Google understand exactly what the content is and where the content's coming from a mobile perspective. But it's amazing how many sites still haven't actually implemented that from what we can see when we crawl a subset of the sites on the web. It's amazing how few sites, as low as less than 2%, have actually implemented that yet.
In fact, I will say this is why I added here in one of in which scenarios I recommend to implement AMP is when you ideally don't have any mobile version, or the one that you have is a responsive web, but not an independent one. Because if you already have an M subdomain with an independent URL structure, with AMP you will have another one, another independent mobile web structure, and you need to sort it out and configure it well to point out to the right URL as the canonical one, etc., etc. So it's really non-trivial work here. And then also at some point, and this is important, I think, that Google want to push more and more to use AMP as independent mobile version instead of the one that usually existed today with N subdomains. And then another thing, even push AMP at some point as canonical versions, as original pages. And this is why a lot of SEOs, if you go to any event or if you follow AMP conversations over Twitter, you will see many specialists going like with a lot of theories and saying, oh no, the death of the open web, right? Because there are a few documents out there, like with recommendations, what will happen if Google, Google trying to push AMP as also a little bit as canonical, as your original one and only pages will have there,
But I totally agree. I mean, it's easier for them to deal with at the end of the day, and I mean, you could look at it in the sense that you mentioned. Obviously, an AMP is a stripped back HTML page, so there's less content in it, which means there's less, effectively less kilobytes to the page, which means it's less, it's less for them to actually serve that content, serve that page, or crawl it. So actually, there's maybe a cost saving in some respects in there for Google. But it suddenly becomes quite an interesting conversation. Another question we had from Ashok was, and it's a difficult one to answer, and I've got my view as well in some respects, but it's what percentage of traffic or search positions will increase through AMP? I mean, it's quite an open question. It's maybe a bit of a gut feel question. I mean, interested in your view.
Yeah, it will depend, of course, and there's something so important. It will depend, again, on your mobile search potential. Again, for B2B type of sites, maybe it's not as high as B2C. For example, I have clients in the food delivery area and industry where, oh my God, 70% of the traffic come from mobile, the search traffic come from mobile. So of course, the impact that anything on mobile can have with them is super high. So this is why it's very important that you particularly verify that for your own site by going first by doing a keyword research that take into consideration the mobile search volume and mobile search share of the different queries that you target. And this is why I came here and show these examples with the backpacks, right? Even in the same category of business, the share of searches coming from one versus the other is different. So for example, if you ask me this question and you only have backpacks on sale, right, and you want to just target this and focus on ranking for this term, I will say mobile is super important for you, and the type of visibility that you can get with AMP or whatever that you do for mobile is going to be huge. You see, 71% of the queries come from mobile devices. However, if you only target about travel backpacks and nothing else, yeah, just 37%. Of course, it's not trivial, but it's not 70-something, of course.
Agreed.
So what is the impact? It will depend on the queries that you target. This is why it's very important that you always add the segmentation, device segmentation to your keyword research, and you go and validate what is the mobile share that the queries that you are going to target have, and then you prioritize accordingly also when you create one counter or another on mobile. And then again, if there's a lot of this queries that are non-transactional, that are more informational, news-related, these are the ones that will be likely shown in results like this, in the carousel, right? The type of content that is included here is news-related content, media-related content, informational queries, not transactional ones. So if you are targeting much more of this type of queries, they are likely to get even more visibility, because they are likely to be included in a carousel instead of the typical SERP like these ones, right? So it's something that you should validate for yourself in these ways.
No, totally agree. Just thinking about that from a point of view of indexation then as well, I mean, a question from William Hollingworth was around, do you think Google recommends or not having a mobile sitemap will change with mobile first index? So I mean, we've heard in the past from Google talking about having a mobile sitemap index, and we know that Google kind of at the minute prioritizes, even if you have a mobile sitemap, it'll kind of prioritize going and crawling the desktop site first. It's just the way it works, you know. Is that going to completely flip on its head?
Yeah, and this is the one thing. All these mobile-related configurations for independent mobile sites, right? Right now, of the canonical points to the desktop URL, we had the mobile sitemap because these were additional URLs, and we needed to notify Google to find them, and yes, to understand the relationship with the desktop ones. But again, it should be the other way around now. the URLs that should be crawled and indexed primarily should be the mobile ones, not your desktop ones, in order to rank, right? So I will go and directly, you know, and this is something that you should already be doing in any case. Register your M subdomain. If you have an independent mobile website, register your M subdomain in the Google Search Console, and really monitor your activity there, and request that this structure of your site is crawled and through the Google Search Console interface, whether if you decide to generate a sitemap or not, and notify about the relationship. The one thing is like the relationship that you could specify on mobile sitemaps, right? That you can directly there include which are the real alternate for mobile specifically. I will say that I will prefer, until now, it depends. I don't know if Google will change the way that they notify about this, but what is the problem with sitemaps in general for me? That Google informs in the Google Search Console how many URLs they have indexed, are taken into consideration from the ones that you send on the sitemap. They don't say which ones from them. They don't say if they have taken into consideration the hreflang or the mobile tagging, if you have included those there, right? So for me, it's like, no. That is why I want to implement hreflang in the head of the HTML, and the same with the mobile tagging, right? And this is why I will continue to avoid doing it so until the time if Google at some point notify about this at this granular level on the Google Search Console.
No, I mean, it's certainly a report that we find quite interesting in DeepCrawl is, you know, just on the top level in some respects, is actually looking at because obviously we'll crawl the sitemap as well, and we look at the number of pages that you know, are out there and available on the site, and then how many of those compare to how many pages sit within the sitemap, and give you the delta between the two, so you can then actually move those pages that aren't in the sitemap into the sitemap, because on larger sites we see a lot of people just, you know, whether it's just dev release or stuff, people just not thinking about updating the sitemap, and I think that sounds true in the desktop world, and I think even more so we'll do in the mobile world, like you're saying, Aleyda, which is great. I'm conscious of time. We're kind of getting towards the end. I'm going to throw the one big question out there, which I'm sure everybody's intrigued by, is, you know, so when do you think Google's going to flip this? I've got my view. I'll let you go first. We've heard of Google batch testing at the moment, you know, and actually already moving pages over. And John Mueller came out about a month or so ago and said that, you know, Google will move you over if your site is mobile ready. And so I think they're already starting to tinker and play. But when's your view? I mean, you alluded to like next year.
I think that they still need to sort out many things, like for example how AMP will play and the role of AMP in all of this. Also because at the end of the day, they will take a little bit of the place of this independent mobile versions that already existed until now, right? So there are so many things that still need to, I think, at least to be specified. And there are so many questions all the times going on. And in the Q&As, like I remember, like last time that when I was at this Q&As with Gary, I believe it was in SMX West a few months ago, and someone asked about the implementation of short-line and mobile first. If short-line should point to the desktop as right now, or to mobile, because this was going to change. So there was still not a final answer around that specifically. So I think there's so much. So I will say that I don't believe that it will happen before mid-2018.
Well, you're not far off what I was going to say. So I'm not just saying things you just said, but I've always said, and I've said for a few times, I'll be referencing, I reckon Q2 next year. So I'm slightly before mid, and you're on mid. So we'll see who's right at the end, and we can catch up and see where we stand on that one. Obviously, we're kind of out of time. So without further ado, I just want to obviously remind everybody that you know, we have recorded the whole session today, so this will be available, and we will send that out to everybody that signed up to the webinar for you guys tomorrow. We will also send a survey out to attendees. We love feedback, so please take the time to actually tell us what you thought of today. I think the content's been brilliant. Aleyda has been amazing. I've had the easy job just to sit in here and muse about a subject which I love, which is SEO, so that's great for me. If you do have any questions about the webinar, you can email our marketing team, which is marketing@deepcrawl.com. So please do that. And obviously, as Aleyda's alluded to, we've got a bunch of stuff in DeepCrawl now from a mobile perspective, and obviously we've just launched our new Google Search Console integration in the last week. So please pop on the site, grab a free trial, play with the mobile reports that Aleyda showed you today. Tell us what you think of the new GSC integration, as I say, because we love feedback. And with that, you know, without further ado, I'd just love to thank you, Aleyda, for taking the time and doing this with us. I really enjoyed the hour's chat, and I hope we get to do this again. And also, you know, if you want to see Aleyda in person, like me, she's down at Brighton in September 15th. For Brighton SEO. We're both presenting there. Aleyda will be talking on a lot about what we talked today, which is on AMP, so carrying on the mobile theme. So please come down and catch her live, and I'll be kicking around as well, as you can imagine. But I'd just like to say a big thank you to you, Aleyda, for getting involved today and taking the time out.
Thank you for the amazing opportunity. I really, you know, I'm really looking forward to share even more in Brighton. And please, if any of you have any question when you listen to this webinar, just let me know. I am always reachable in Twitter.
Fantastic. Thank you, Aleyda. And without further ado, as I say, we're out of time. Big appreciation to you guys for joining the call today, and hope you found the content useful and slides. And we'll get that recording out to you. And as I say, please do feedback on the questionnaire. We'll very much enjoy that. Big thank you to you guys. And that finishes our webinar for today with DeepCrawl, talking about obviously mobile optimization and Google Search Console. Thanks again.
Thank you.